Welcome back to another podcast. This is Abe Cohn with THC Legal Group, and today we have Josh with us. Josh, welcome.
Thank you so much, Ed.
So tell us what's going on. How are you involved in the industry? What are you interested in? What does the company do? Let us get to know you a little bit.
Okay, I think for us it all starts with consulting. Our first foray into the cannabis industry was we split off a part of our established consulting firm in Chicago that had done business development and product development in other industries, and the name of that was Green Science. And so that's the name we used to get into the cannabis industry. And we started working with startups and even some more mature companies to try and make them more relevant. And eventually that company was acquired by Blue Diamond. And now I'm the CEO of Blue Diamond, and we have a few different holdings in the cannabis industry.
Fantastic. Many people encounter challenges, of course, because federal law has still relegated cannabis to a Schedule One drug under the Controlled Substance Act, and that makes it federally illegal. What kind of challenges have you faced in your career with cannabis as a direct function of this federal illegality?
I think the federal legality defines the whole industry at the moment, even though a lot of people pretend it just doesn't exist. One of the catch-22s about the Schedule One, if it was to go on Schedule Two right away, that would result in pharmaceutical companies immediately being able to produce products and possibly even cross state lines, and that could put into jeopardy some of the fledgling industries that we have now in the individual states. So, in my opinion, I'm happy with Schedule One where it is, and we have new success now in the last election with all these states in the recreational or the adult use. So, I'd like to see these states to be able to develop their programs for a couple of years before we really have any change in Schedule One. So, everything in California is up in the air. All the existing businesses are in jeopardy because they need to convert. We have a brand new set of laws in Michigan. So as long as the new administration stays away from and sticks to their guns about respecting state rights, I think the federal, although it defines the real investment and what's happening in the industry, I think the people that are getting into it now and investing now are making safe investments.
That is actually a very interesting perspective. Many of the guests that we've had on the show to date, just rail against its Schedule One classification, and for good reason. But you're offering, I think, a very nuanced and strategic way to look at it, even perhaps from a glass half full point of view. But in a certain way, maybe we shouldn't rush too quickly to try to push cannabis out of Schedule One.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, and if you take a look at why is cannabis legal in Colorado, and the reason is that there was a medical program that was so out of control that it had to be fixed. Same thing with Washington State. I mean, the real reason why they became adult use states was they needed to shut down a medical program that in fact wasn't medical. And we can safely say perhaps that 70 to 80% of all medical marijuana programs today are really just, I won't say even covers, but what they're doing are enabling people to do what we would call today functional nutraceuticals. People we recognize today, everybody gets up and drinks coffee, everybody goes out after work and has a beer, and today we're going full force against alcohol and coffee and saying, like, we don't want to pretend cannabis is something different. Yeah, this is something that affects you, but we think it affects you in more positive ways than that.
Right.
So there are good ways to go, directly against those current, let's say, maintenance drugs.
Right. Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, many of these things just kind of come down to how you choose to look at it and how you can position yourself in order to best take advantage of the existing regulatory scheme. What are some of the challenges that you've personally faced in the industry as a function of even as low as the stigma? Just people pushing back against not wanting their state to be involved in the industry? Do you find that as you're going around doing your everyday life and telling people what you do, that people aren't necessarily giving you the warmest of responses and reactions to it?
Well, I think there is actually the medical community, the doctors that I speak to, the cancer doctors that I speak to, concerning what's their feeling about what they hear from a research standpoint. I just came from the MJ Daily Show in Las Vegas, where there were 10,000 attendees and a lot of talk about, stage 4 cancer cures using this strain and this strain. And so I think the doctors themselves are very skeptical.
Yeah.
They need to, when somebody is diagnosed with a stage 4 terminal cancer, there's a responsibility to that patient that the cannabis industry is yet to embrace on a really professional level.
So as far as your own interest in the industry and how you view its legalization and what society should be thinking about cannabis, how we should be thinking about it, are you of the opinion that the government should just be, we mentioned state rights, are you more of a federalism kind of guy? You think the government should be letting the states do what they want to do, or are you interested in the industry because you think it has real medicinal value to patients who need it? What is your stimulus for being involved?
If we take what's happening today, I would say that the future is that it's a totally unregulated product. Pretty much at minimum or at maximum regulated like alcohol. But we see already in places like Washington State that low dosage THC and low dosage CBD products are showing up over the counter. And so if we can really analyze the cannabis plant and how people are adopting, the protein from the plant, the fibers from the plant, the medicinal value of the plant, the therapeutic and recreational the plant. I mean, the cannabis plant is, all the hemp products and all the industrial hemp products. It's really developing a very powerful synergy with the human race. And so I see the CBD products in the short term being like omega-3s, where everybody will want to know that they're getting a certain amount of CBDs in their diet. And the THC products will be like caffeine and beer. They'll just be part of everyday life, embedded in the products that we use.
Well, transitioning from kind of the more abstract and philosophical side of this discussion into the real-world business part, which is what many of our listeners want to know about, tell us kind of what your day-to-day life is like being in this industry. So you wake up on a Monday, everybody's interest in the business is different according to whatever business it is that they have founded. But for you personally, what is it like to be a businessman in cannabis? What does a day look like for you? A typical day.
Well, you're really on the operating level of the companies that we're working with, they're really in a grinded out process. I mean, for dispensaries, the difference between $300 to $400 in sales per day is make or break of the whole business. So on the reality, let's take Nevada for example, because we were just there. Now the few dispensaries in Las Vegas are doing very well, but the ones that are outside of town that don't have the number of patients yet, they've invested a lot of money and aren't getting the return. So on the short term, we fight the financing battles for these small companies. How can they get the money they need without having to give up all of the equity in their company? Because they're all in that same, there's a lot of startups that are in that same position. You need some traction, you need some board business. For example, we have a company that called Cannabis Clean that we're equity partners with in Denver. And so they're a professional janitorial service that specializes in cleaning grow rooms and dispensaries. And so the biggest challenge for them is getting qualified individuals, getting them trained, being able to get the leases on the equipment, get the credit and the applications done so we can get the machines that we need. So on a very practical level, it's like any business. It's how do we get the short-term cash flow to keep the operation going. And sometimes the more you're growing, the worse the cash flow is. So as a public company, we have a few, more, let's say, tools in the toolbox as to how to help these companies collaborate and get some short-term financing, get some people to bet on them in the short term without giving up too much equity in their company.
Very interesting. I'm curious about kind of what you've seen as far as the negotiation between a startup company and their potential investors. Do you think that investors are more aggressive in what they're demanding because it is still, a bit of a riskier proposition given its federal illegality?
Well, I think there's a certain sexiness of being a cannabis investor, and we see a lot of these investors playing hard to get because the cannabis business is seemingly so lucrative. If by playing hard to get, their people are pushing special deals, special incentives, and special things for their investors. So I think the one thing that startup companies could learn is that the investors really, in the end, care about two things. They care about the quality of the team of the people that are going to bring it home, and they care about the real numbers. If you don't have real projections and real cash flows and real documents, in the end, you won't be able to convert with the investors. The idea and the excitement and the positioning is not enough anymore. The industry really favors people that bring quality skills in from other industries. Even ourselves, we were consultants in business development and product development consultants before we got involved in cannabis, and we brought those skills into this industry.
One of the concerns people are having, right now, beginning of December 2016, is what's going to happen when Trump and his cabinet makes its way to the White House. What does Jeff Sessions really believe about cannabis? What type of laws can we expect to pass? How will the Trump administration differ from the Obama administration? Do you think that we are kind of at a crossroads, or certainly entrepreneurs and startup companies that are just not sure if now is the right time to invest, given this uncertainty? How do you view that?
I don't think you'll get any real investment, like Wall Street type investment, until it comes off of Schedule 1. But remember, coming off of Schedule 1, it also has that secondary aspect to it. So I think that there's a catch-22 now for Trump and Sessions, that I think that if they don't respect states' rights and let the vote of the people in these states dictate their position, I think they're going to be in trouble. There's going to be too much pushback. I think in the end, Trump wants people to like him, and I don't think he's going to reverse or do anything that's going to reverse the excitement that's coming with what these states are choosing to do. Now, on the other hand, if the pharmaceutical companies pressure enough, he might do something like take it off of Schedule 1, but I think there'd be a lot of pushback on that because you would need a whole real program as to how it works with the health insurance. Because if you take it off of Schedule 1, now you've got to pay for it. So there's a whole nother, because of the health insurance battle, so I think the Schedule 1 status is safe for at least 2 more years.
What's so interesting about cannabis, certainly from a political science perspective, is that it's such a crystal clear example of what where the divergence is between libertarians and Republicans. Both groups, ostensibly are supposed to be small federal government, strong 10th Amendment, state rights, federalism parties, and yet on the issue of cannabis, the Republican Party has seemed to allow its moral imperative vis-a-vis cannabis to trump many of its otherwise traditional views on state rights versus federal rights.
Well, of course, I mean, the reason there is that is the tax revenue.
Uh-huh.
I mean, Colorado's been able to demonstrate that this tax revenue thing is real. So, look, we have a new set of laws that just passed in Michigan. Those laws passed on September 15th with a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and a Republican governor signing it into law. And the sole reason that these laws passed, again, because there's an existing medical system that's unregulated, and the state wants revenue and tax, be able to tax it.
Uh-huh.
So overall, what we find is that, like you say, they're willing to put aside the fact if it's legal and it's legal in other states and they're making the revenue, then we should be able to make the revenue too. And we see even states setting up parallel utility services and parallel services that allow them to service the cannabis industry without violating their contracts with federal employees and federal involvements.
There's no end to the wrinkles of this discussion, is there, Josh?
No, there really isn't. And like I said, we're even working now with the fact that there are really mature companies in this business that are already spinning off little startups and little things so that they can keep that excitement.
I won't go into too much detail, but a client that we're working with now is doing something similar. They have their parent company, and the goal now is to establish a set of subsidiary companies, each one addressing unique needs in the cannabis space, and hopefully recruiting CEOs to import their experience from the vanilla working world into the cannabis space and grow out each vertical independent of one another.
That's a good model for sure.
It sounds like you have so much experience in so many different things. You mentioned that you've brought your own personal experience with business development into the cannabis industry. How are you going about getting new clients for your own business? What type of media outlets do you choose to use to get attention? Are you using social media? What does business development?
I gotta tell you, I'm 60 years old, and over the years in any industry that I've been into, the number one driver for business for me has always been trade shows.
Okay.
I find that the level of interest in communicating what you do and who you want to do it to is at its highest level when it's kind of the feeding frenzy environment of something like the show we just had in Vegas. And over the years, by continually attending events, I mean, in the last 3 years, I've probably been to 10 cannabis investment conferences, 5 or 6 major trade shows. And so by integrating yourself into the industry, when somebody hears say, "Hey, this is something that probably Josh's group could do." I mean, we just picked up a new customer recently, and a big conventional edibles manufacturer, a company that you might not imagine would be interested in getting into cannabis. And so I would say, in closing, one of the biggest dangers to startups and entrepreneurs in the cannabis industry is getting a little bit too enamored with their own idea.
Okay.
There are people that are selling nutrients in the cannabis industry at a premium because there's a story that goes along with it. And over the next few years, mainstream horticultural products are going to show up that are half the price, a quarter of the price. And as mainstream edibles food manufacturers get into edibles, their price per unit is going to drop. And so if you think you're going to make a lot of money off of just branding and packaging, you better have good products to be able to carry you through, because there's going to be reasonable quality products at discount prices as the market grows in size. So it's not just enough to say, "Hey, let's put cannabis in this frozen pizza and go into the frozen cannabis pizza business." You at that point, you have to really understand multi-million-dollar pizza manufacturing to pull it off.
What you're referencing might very well speak to the concern that people are having now, which is that the cannabis industry, as a function of its success and mainstream appeal, is becoming, frankly, saturated in certain verticals, and the marketplace is just getting too crowded. What do you think about that? Are we experiencing?
I don't agree.
You don't agree?
Okay. It's I think that, in early on in the business, it's just like, it's the evolution of the cannabis business. Businesses try different forms, different styles. Let's go back to the idea that 90% of all startups fail. Nobody believes it's going to be them.
Right.
But 90% of all the species that lived on the planet are dead.
Yep.
They weren't successful. So what we need this, the capitalist system and the American system relies on this. It's very wasteful in some ways. You could make a case that you could coordinate this better if the industry would cooperate more rather than compete more. But what it does is it breeds diversity. And one of the things that's lacking in the industry right now is any attention to sustainability and green business practices and fair labor practices. And so we're trying to, as the industry grows, those types of things become more important, and you have to spend more time worrying about more conventional problems than you will just the excitement of cannabis.
I speak to a lot of libertarian groups, and I've been on libertarian podcasts, and what you mentioned about fair labor practices, I think is a critical and kind of unique point to consider. Certainly from a strong libertarian perspective, we want limited government intervention. We want the government to just be staying out as much as possible. Let the free market kind of decide. I'm using air quotes here to all the listeners.
Sure.
But the free market and capitalism should ideally be figuring out what's, quote, fair by the sustainability of the business. And so once a business is no longer, quote, fair, hopefully the market will regulate that through consumer choice, and that business will go under. So do you see room for a lot of government regulation?
Well, I have two comments on that.
Okay.
First of all, I don't claim to be an expert on the libertarian platform.
Okay, sure.
My understanding is that libertarians would prefer if all drugs were legal. That's pretty much the hardcore libertarian platform is, if people want to use heroin, maybe they should register with the government before they use it. But in fact, all drugs should be legal.
Yeah, that's certainly a more hardcore libertarian perspective, but
it's not uncommonly heard libertarian word.
I agree, absolutely.
So now the other thing I would say, which was something that my father always told me. My father was an architect in Chicago, and he told me was that the laws generally don't reflect the current wishes of the people. They reflect the wishes of the people 20, 30 years ago.
Okay.
And so it takes some time to catch up. And so when you're living in a time when things are changing, you have this urgency where you want things to change. So whether Trump is a bump in the road or whatever, we're moving in the libertarian direction. So that should be a comfort to the libertarians that people are getting more comfortable with things. There certainly is now a more interest in less government intervention in what I should do and what I should say. And I think that the cannabis is another part of that. So I think we will catch up, and I think the laws in the country will catch up, and it might eventually not go just off of Schedule 1. It just might not be scheduled at all.
Right. Well, and certainly many people are looking forward to that day.
Sure.
We're coming to the end of the podcast. I really just want to give you an opportunity to relay any sort of message that you think would be of value to startups and other entrepreneurs in the space. How should they go about approaching being a part of this new industry?
Well, we've seen a couple different things develop in the market in the industry, and one of them is a series of incubators. And although I wouldn't recommend it for everybody, if you're sort of beyond just the concept and you've got a little bit of revenue, you might look at one of these incubators. I know that like a place like Canopy Boulder, which is part of the ArcView group, is one that's very popular, and they're basically all over the country in these areas. Now, the reason they start these incubators is they want first dibs at these new companies. So by starting an incubator, you attract the best ideas, and then you get to choose which ones you might want to invest in. So the downside of the incubator is that you have a lot of sharks who are looking to take a bite out of you.
Right.
They might be friendly sharks, and you know what? It's better to have a couple bites taken out of you and live and have a great company rather than avoid the sharks completely and just die a slow death. The reason why they call it Shark Tank is you need these sharks, you need these people.
There is certainly some symbiotic relationship that people should not shy away from.
So I would say another way to look at it is the way that we do it at Blue Diamond Consulting. And at Blue Diamond Consulting, we're not interested in taking a bite out of you. We're not interested in taking equity from the company. What we do is we do that first stage interview development stuff, like the new client that we signed yesterday, the food people. It was just $1,500 for the initial 10 hours of consulting. And in 10 hours, I can and my team, we can create a whole business plan and set of documents for a whole brand new company that never existed. We do it on an exercise basis all the time, and we do it for our clients all the time. So for as little as $1,000 to $1,500, you could hire a consultant, just like you would hire a lawyer, somebody who isn't going to be your partner, isn't going to. You have to promise. People give away equity in their companies too quickly to people who provide consulting and references. You should be able to network in the industry. There's a lot of people that can help you without you paying a lot of money. So my advice is before you pick a real partner or you take money from somebody and say this is going to be an investor in our company, make sure you really understand your own business plan. A lot of startups think that business plans are only bullshit that we do to try and get investors. No, a business plan is our own internal mantra. This is what we as a group are trying to achieve. And yeah, it changes every day. We have to update it and we make right turns. But the business plan is for us. And we try and capture the imagination of the investor with the business plan. And the farther you are along in the process, the more respect you get from investors. And that's why I say it all starts with consulting. It all starts with finding people you trust to give you free advice or cheap advice to make sure you've got this thing worked out before you dive in.
Oh, unbelievable. Fantastic message. I know I've certainly learned a lot today, and I'm confident that all of our listeners, certainly people at the beginning of their company development, trying to get off the ground, it was wonderful. How can people get in touch with you? How do they contact you? How do they find you? Where can they reach you?
Well, we at Blue Diamond Consulting, we really promote what we call our suite of services. So if you just Google Blue Diamond Consulting Suite of Services, you'll find our website, and that kind of breaks down all the things we do. And on it, of course, we're a publicly traded company, and Blue Diamond Consulting is one of the divisions. And so Blue Diamond Ventures can be found on the OTC markets under the symbol BLDV, and there you'll be able to find, all of our annual reports and all of our press releases and everything, all the projects that we're working on. And of course, we also have a website at BLDV INC or Blue Diamond Inc. BLDVinc.com. And so those are the. And if by email, it would be info@BLDVinc.com.
Fantastic. Wow. Well, listen, Josh, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was a real pleasure, and I think we really all did gain a lot.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, speak to you soon. And for everybody listening, this was another Thought Leadership podcast with THC Legal Group.